The galaxy was on fire. Star systems that once thrived with life now floated in silence, their planets scorched and their skies filled with debris. The Drelvok swarm had arrived, and they brought nothing but destruction. Commander Kaler of the Galactic Alliance stood on the bridge of his flagship, Vigilant Star. His tall, blue-skinned frame was rigid, his four eyes fixed on the holographic display of the galaxy. Red lights dotted the map, each one marking the system the Drelvok had conquered. The red lights were spreading like a disease. Another system lost. One of his officers whispered. It was Scylla, a young and hopeful navigator who now looked as though the weight of the galaxy had crushed her. They took the Harlan system in less than a day. Kaler's fists tightened. Harlan was supposed to be a stronghold. They had placed a fleet there, over 200 ships, all destroyed in mere hours. The swarm was unstoppable. The Drelvok were more than just enemies. They were a nightmare. No one truly understood what they were. Their massive ships, organic and insect-like, tore through fleets as if they were paper. Their ground forces overwhelmed planets with sheer numbers. Worst of all, they learned from every battle. Every defeat made them stronger. Kaler took a deep breath. He couldn't afford to show weakness. The Galactic Alliance had chosen him as their leader, but he knew many doubted him. The council of alien races behind the Alliance was fracturing. Each species blamed the others for their failures. "Send out the distress signal," Kaler said, his voice cold and steady. "We need reinforcements at the Jonder system. If the swarm takes it, we lose the gateway to the core worlds." Scylla hesitated. "Sir, there are no reinforcements left." The room fell silent. Kaler looked around at his crew, his loyal officers who had followed him through years of endless battles. They were exhausted, and so was he. His blue skin had grown pale, his uniform loose on his frame from months of sleepless nights, but he couldn't let them see his despair. "Then we fight with what we have," he said firmly. "We cannot let the Drelvok reach the core worlds." Before anyone could respond, a loud alarm blared across the bridge. The communications officer, a reptilian alien named Vec, turned in his chair, his scaled hands trembling. "Incoming message from the Council, Commander." Kaler nodded, and the holographic display shifted to show the faces of the Council members. Each one represented a different species in the Alliance. Their expressions ranged from fear to anger. "Commander Kaler," began Counselor Vorn, a pale, amphibious alien with sharp features. "The situation is worse than we feared. The swarm is advancing faster than we predicted. We need a solution. Now." Kaler frowned. "A solution? With respect, Counselor, we've been fighting this war for years. We've thrown every weapon, every ship, every strategy at them. Nothing works. What more do you expect me to do?" Another counselor, a feathered alien named Iron, leaned forward. "There is one option we haven't tried," she said cautiously. "The humans." The room fell silent again. Kaler's crew exchanged uneasy glances, even on the bridge of the Vigilant Star. The mention of humans made people uncomfortable. "Humans." Kaler's voice was sharp. "You can't be serious." "They've been watching the war," Erin continued. "They've stayed neutral so far, but their technology is unique. Their tactics are unpredictable. They might be the only ones who can surprise the Drelvok." Kaler shook his head. "Humans are reckless. Their history is full of violence and chaos. They can't be trusted." Counselor Vorn interjected, his tone urgent. "And yet they have survived every conflict they've faced. They are resourceful, Commander. The Alliance is running out of time. We must reach out to them." Kaler felt his chest tighten. He didn't like this. The humans had always been outsiders. They lived in the Sol system, far from the rest of the galaxy, and they preferred to stay isolated. They were known for their dangerous experiments and unpredictable behavior. But Vorn was right about one thing. The Alliance was out of time. "If we contact them, what's to say they won't turn against us?" Kaler asked. The humans might use this war to take advantage of the Alliance. We don't have a choice, Erin said softly. If the Drelvok win, none of us will survive. Not even the humans. Kaler stared at the holographic map, his mind racing. He thought of all the lives lost, the colonies burned, the planets turned into wastelands. He thought of his own family on Larnus Prime, waiting for him to come home. If the swarm wasn't stopped, there would be no home to return to. Fine, he said at last. I'll contact them. But if this goes wrong, the blood will be on your hands. The council members nodded, their faces grim. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence once more. Kaler turned to his crew. Prepare a message to Earth. Tell them the Alliance is requesting their help. Do you think they'll answer? Scylla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kaler didn't reply. He didn't know if humanity would answer, and if they did, he didn't know if they would be saviors or destroyers. But one thing was certain. The fate of the galaxy now rested on the most unpredictable species in the universe. The message was sent. Now, all they could do was wait. On board the Vigilant Star, the bridge was tense with silence. Kaler sat in his chair, his fingers tapping against the armrest. His crew avoided his gaze, afraid to say what everyone was thinking. What if the humans said no? Hours turned into days. Each moment dragged on as reports of new Drelvok attacks came in. Another system had fallen. Another fleet destroyed. Kaler's patience was running thin. Finally, the comms officer, Vec, straightened in his seat. Commander, he said, his voice sharp with excitement. We've received a reply from Earth. All eyes turned to Kaler. He nodded. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life. A human woman appeared, standing tall in a crisp uniform. Her sharp green eyes and stern expression gave her an air of authority. Her brown hair was tied back, and her tone was calm but firm. This is Commander Sarah Kane of Earth's Defense Fleet, she said. We received your message. Kaler stood and stepped forward. He was taller than any human, but something about Kane's presence made her seem equally commanding. Commander Kane, he said, I am Kaler, leader of the Galactic Alliance Fleet. We are requesting humanity's assistance in our war against the Drelvok swarm. Kane's expression didn't change. The Drelvok swarm, she repeated, her tone neutral. We've been aware of their activities. Kaler felt a flicker of frustration. Aware. They are consuming entire star systems. The galaxy is on the brink of annihilation. And yet, Kane replied, you avoided contacting humanity until now. Kaler's jaw tightened. She wasn't wrong. For years, the Alliance had kept its distance from Earth. Humanity's history of wars, experiments, and disregard for intergalactic protocols had made them seem dangerous and unreliable. But now, the Alliance had no choice. This isn't about the past, Kaler said. This is about survival, for all of us. Kane's eyes narrowed. She glanced to the side, as if consulting someone off-screen. Then she looked back at Kaler. We'll help, she said, but we have conditions. Kaler's crew exchanged uneasy glances. What conditions? Kaler asked, his voice steady. First, Kane began, humanity will be granted equal status in the Alliance. No more isolation, no more barriers. We want full access to your technology, resources, and information. Kaler's brow furrowed. That's a bold demand. Kane crossed her arms. Bold is what's keeping Earth alive. You contacted us because you're losing this war. If you want our help, it's on our terms. The crew muttered among themselves, but Kaler raised a hand, silencing them. He studied Kane. There was no arrogance in her tone, only confidence. She wasn't bluffing. What else? Kaler asked. Kane's expression hardened. We'll share our weapons and tactics, but we control how they're used. No interference from the Alliance. Kaler's frustration grew. You're asking us to trust you completely. That's a lot to ask, considering your reputation. Kane's gaze didn't waver. Trust is a two-way street, Commander. Humanity has kept itself alive against impossible odds. We know how to fight a losing war and win. The question is, do you want our help or not? The bridge was silent. Kaler weighed his options. The Council wouldn't like this. Many of the Alliance's leaders already distrusted humans. If he agreed to these terms, he would face backlash. But if he refused, the galaxy was doomed. After a long pause, Kaler nodded. Fine. The Alliance agrees to your terms. Kane allowed a small smile to touch her lips. Smart choice. Send your fleet, Kaler said. We need every ship you can spare. Our ships are already en route, Kane replied. But I should warn you, we're not like your other allies. Our methods are unorthodox. Kaler raised an eyebrow. Unorthodox how? Kane didn't answer directly. Instead, she stepped aside, revealing a second figure on the hologram, a human pilot in a sleek, black jumpsuit. The pilot's head was encased in a helmet, glowing with faint blue lines that pulsed with energy. This, Kane said, is our secret weapon, the neural fusion system. Kaler frowned. What is it? The NFS allows our pilots to merge their minds with their ships, Kane explained. They don't just fly, they become the ship. Their reactions are faster, their coordination perfect. It's how we've stayed ahead of every enemy we faced. Kaler's crew exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of merging a mind with a machine was unsettling. There's a cost, Kane admitted. The system pushes pilots to their limits. Some don't survive. But those who do are the best in the galaxy. Kaler's expression darkened. You're risking your own people's lives. Kane met his gaze. We do whatever it takes to win. The question is, Commander, can your alliance handle what we bring to the table? Kaler took a deep breath. Humanity's methods were dangerous, but so was the swarm. If the alliance had any hope of surviving, they needed the humans and their unorthodox ways. Very well, he said. We'll work together. But if your methods put the alliance at risk. They won't, Kane interrupted. Trust me, Commander. The Drelvok won't know what hit them. Cliffhanger. As the hologram faded, Kaler turned to his crew. Prepare the fleet, he said. The humans are coming. But deep down, he wondered, had they just saved the galaxy or sealed its fate? The fleet of the Galactic Alliance gathered at the edge of the Jonder system. Dozens of ships floated in formation, their hulls battered from years of endless war. On board the Vigilant Star, Commander Kaler stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the vastness of space ahead. The humans were coming. His crew whispered among themselves, exchanging nervous glances. Few of them had ever seen a human, let alone worked alongside one. Humanity's reputation for recklessness and secrecy made them a source of both fear and curiosity. How do we know they'll show up? Asked Scylla, the young navigator. They'll come, Kaler said, though even he wasn't entirely sure. The humans had agreed to help, but their motivations remained unclear. Did they truly want to save the galaxy, or were they using this war for their own gain? A sharp beep from the communications console interrupted his thoughts. Vec, the comms officer, turned in his chair, his scaled face tense. Commander, we're receiving a signal. It's them. Kaler straightened. Put it on the main display. The holographic map of the system vanished, replaced by the image of Commander Sarah Kane. Her sharp green eyes and calm demeanor were as intimidating as ever. Commander Kaler, she said, her voice steady. Our fleet has arrived. Where? Kaler asked, his eyes scanning the viewports. There was nothing but empty space around the Alliance fleet. Look behind you, Kane replied with a faint smile. Kaler frowned and turned to the main viewport. The crew gasped. One by one, massive human warships materialized out of hyperspace. Their dark hulls gleamed with an eerie metallic sheen, and their sharp, angular designs were unlike anything the Alliance had ever built. The largest ship, a dreadnought named Erebus, loomed at the center of the fleet. Its size dwarfed even the Vigilant Star. and its weapons bristled with a menacing energy. Smaller ships flanked it, moving in perfect coordination. They were cloaked, Vec whispered, his voice filled with awe. We didn't even detect them. Kaler clenched his jaw. The humans' technology was as advanced as the rumors suggested. But what unnerved him even more was how easily they had taken the Alliance by surprise. Impressive entrance, Kaler said, forcing his voice to remain calm. We like to keep our enemies guessing, Kane replied. Now let's get to work. What's the current situation? Kaler gestured to the holographic map, which reappeared in the center of the bridge. The Drovok are advancing on Jonder. If they take the system, they'll have a direct path to the core worlds. We've positioned our fleet here, but we're outnumbered and outgunned. Kane studied the map, her expression unreadable. You're right. This is a critical point. If we lose here, it's over. Kaler frowned. You sound confident. Do you have a plan? We always have a plan, Kane said, her tone matter-of-fact. But first, let me introduce you to someone. The hologram shifted, and a new figure appeared. It was a human pilot, clad in the sleek black jumpsuit of the neural fusion system. The helmet obscured their face, but the glowing blue lines pulsing across their suit gave them an almost otherworldly appearance. This is Lieutenant Ryan Carter, Kane said. He's one of our best NFS pilots. Kaler studied the pilot. What makes him so special? Kane's faint smile returned. Lieutenant Carter isn't just flying a ship. He is the ship. The neural fusion system allows him to merge with his fighter, reacting faster than any organic being could on their own. He's our edge against the Drovok. The crew on the Vigilant Star exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of a pilot merging with a machine was unsettling, even to those accustomed to advanced technology. You're putting a lot of faith in one pilot, Kaler said cautiously. Kane's expression hardened. Carter isn't just a pilot. He's a weapon. And when the Drovok see what he can do, they'll think twice about their so-called superiority. Before Kaler could respond, an alarm blared across the bridge. Commander, Vec shouted. Drovok ships inbound, hundreds of them. The holographic map lit up with red dots as the enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace. The Drovok ships were massive, organic monstrosities, their twisted hulls glowing with a sickly green light. The swarm had arrived. Kane's voice was calm but firm. Lieutenant Carter, you're up. Show them what we're made of. Yes, Mom, Carter replied, his voice distorted slightly by the helmet. On the viewport, Kaler watched as a single human fighter shot out of the Erebus. The ship was sleek and black, barely visible against the darkness of space. That's it? Scylla asked, her voice incredulous. One fighter. Kane's smile was almost predatory. Just watch. As the Drovok fleet advanced, Carter's fighter accelerated toward them. The ship moved with impossible speed, weaving through the enemy formation like a shadow. Bright streaks of energy erupted from the Drovok ships, but none of them came close to hitting the fighter. Then Carter struck. His fighter unleashed a barrage of precision attacks, targeting the Drovok ships' weak points with deadly accuracy. One by one, the massive enemy ships exploded, their organic hulls breaking apart in flashes of green fire. The crew of the Vigilant Star watched in stunned silence. Kaler couldn't believe his eyes. One human pilot was doing what entire Alliance fleets had failed to accomplish. This is just the beginning, Kane said. With our technology and your numbers, we can win this war. But you need to trust us. Kaler stared at the viewport, his mind racing. The humans were more powerful and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. But for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Cliffhanger. As Carter's fighter continued its assault, Kaler realized that humanity might be the key to defeating the Drovok. But could the Alliance truly trust them? The battle had begun. The Drovok fleet surged forward, their grotesque ships swarming like locusts. Their twisted, organic hulls pulsed with green energy, and their weapons lit up the void of space with sickly, glowing beams. The Galactic Alliance fleet moved to intercept them, their defensive formations rigid and disciplined. But it wasn't enough. On board the Vigilant Star, Commander Kaler watched the unfolding chaos with a sinking heart. The Drelvok had overwhelming numbers, and their relentless advance pushed the Alliance forces to the brink. "Shields are failing on the eastern flank," Vec shouted, his voice filled with panic. "Tell them to hold the line." Kaler barked, but deep down, he knew it was futile. And then the humans made their move. "Commander Kane," Kaler said, his voice tight, "we're losing ground. If you have a plan, now's the time to use it." Kane's holographic image flickered on the main display. She was calm, almost unnervingly so. "We've been waiting for this moment," she said. "Watch and learn." Kaler's frustration flared. This isn't the time for theatrics. But Kane ignored him. She turned to someone off-screen and nodded. "Initiate the maneuver." On the viewport, the human fleet began to move. At first, it seemed chaotic. Smaller ships darted away from the main formation, while the larger vessels held back. The Alliance officers frowned, confused. "What are they doing?" Scylla asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're breaking formation." But Kaler's sharp eyes noticed something. The human ships weren't retreating. They were luring the Drelvok into a trap. As the Drelvok ships chased the smaller human vessels, Kane's voice rang out. "Lieutenant Carter, it's your turn. Engage." Carter's fighter shot forward, slicing through the enemy lines like a blade. His movements were impossibly fast, his attacks precise. But it wasn't just him. The human fleet moved as if they were part of a single mind. Their ships coordinated perfectly, exploiting every weakness in the Drelvok swarm. "What? How are they doing this?" Kaler muttered. Kane's hologram smirked. "Neural fusion systems, not just for pilots. Our ships are linked to each other. Every move, every decision, shared instantly. We fight as one." Kaler stared in awe as the human fleet executed their plan. They split the Drelvok forces, isolating smaller groups and destroying them with ruthless efficiency. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. But the Drelvok weren't so easily defeated. From the center of their fleet, a massive ship emerged. Its organic hull writhed and shifted, and its weapons glowed with a sickly green energy. It fired a single beam that tore through the Alliance's front line, obliterating 3 ships in an instant. The bridge of the Vigilant Star shook as the shockwave reached them. "What was that?" Vec shouted. Kaler's eyes narrowed. "A superweapon." Kane's expression darkened. "We've seen this before. The Drelvok mothership. It's their command center. And their deadliest weapon." Kaler gritted his teeth. "How do we stop it?" Kane's voice was steady. "Leave that to us." The Erebus, the largest ship in the human fleet, began to move. Its massive engines roared to life, propelling it straight toward the mothership. Smaller human ships flanked it, creating a protective shield. "What are they doing?" Scylla asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're attacking head-on," Kaler said, his voice tinged with both admiration and fear. "They're insane." But Kane's fleet didn't waver. As the Erebus advanced, it unleashed a barrage of weapons fire. Missiles, plasma beams, and railgun rounds tore into the Drelvok mothership, carving deep wounds into its organic hull. The Drelvok retaliated, their weapons pounding against the human shields. Smaller ships were destroyed, their debris scattering across the battlefield. But the humans pressed on, undeterred. And then, Kane revealed her trump card. "Lieutenant Carter," she said, her tone firm. "Activate overdrive." Kaler frowned. "Overdrive? What is that?" Kane's smirk returned. "You'll see." On the viewport, Carter's fighter began to glow. The blue lines on his ship pulsed brighter and brighter until they were almost blinding. The fighter shot forward, its speed doubling, then tripling. It was a blur, weaving through the Drelvok defenses with impossible precision. "What's happening to him?" Scylla asked, her voice trembling. "The neural fusion system," Kane explained. "It pushes the pilot beyond their limits. He's moving faster than their sensors can track." But what?" Kaler demanded. Kane hesitated, just for a moment. "Overdrive comes at a cost. If he stays in this state too long, it could kill him." Kaler stared at her, horrified. "You're risking his life." Kane met his gaze, her expression hard. "This is war, Commander. Sacrifices must be made." Carter's fighter reached the mothership, dodging every attack with inhuman precision. He targeted the ship's core, firing a single, concentrated shot. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mothership erupted in a massive explosion, its green energy imploding before expanding outward in a fiery blast. The Drelvok fleet faltered, their ships retreating in disarray. Cheers erupted on the Vigilant Star's bridge. "They did it," Vex said, his voice filled with awe. "The humans actually did it." But Kaler's gaze remained fixed on the viewport. Carter's fighter was drifting, its glow fading. "Commander Kane," he said, his voice tense. "Is he?" Kane's expression softened. "He's alive. For now. But he won't be able to fight again anytime soon." Cliffhanger. As the Drelvok retreated and the battlefield grew quiet, Kaler realized two things. Humanity's unorthodox tactics had saved them, but at what cost? And more importantly, could they sustain this fragile alliance against an enemy that would return stronger than ever? The battlefield was eerily silent. The shattered remnants of the Drelvok fleet drifted through space, glowing faintly in the dim light of distant stars. For the first time in years, the Galactic Alliance had won a battle. And it was all because of humanity. But the victory came with a price. On the Vigilant Star, Commander Kaler stood at the viewport, his arms crossed. The bridge crew moved around him, their excitement tempered by exhaustion and uncertainty. The humans had proven their worth, but they had also raised new questions Kaler wasn't sure he wanted the answers to. "Commander Kane is requesting to dock," Vex said, turning from the communications console. Kaler nodded. "Grant her permission. I want to speak with her face to face." Moments later, Kane and a small group of human officers boarded the Vigilant Star. Kaler met them in the main briefing room, his expression guarded. Kane's confidence dried, and sharp gaze gave away nothing, but Kaler could sense the tension beneath her calm exterior. "Congratulations on the victory," Kaler said, his tone neutral. "Thank you," Kane replied. "But it's only a small step. The Drelvok will regroup, and next time, they'll come at us harder." Kaler frowned. "I won't deny that your tactics were effective. But your methods, they're dangerous. What you did to Lieutenant Carter, pushing him to the brink, was reckless." Kane's eyes narrowed. "And what would you have done, Commander? Sacrifice more lives in a futile defensive stand." Carter knew the risks, and he accepted them. That's what it takes to win a war. Kaler's jaw tightened. "At what cost? How many more of your pilots will you burn out before this is over?" The room grew quiet. The other human officers exchanged uneasy glances, but Kane didn't back down. "We do what we have to," she said firmly. "The Drelvok won't show us mercy, and we can't afford to hold back. If that means making sacrifices, so be it." Kaler shook his head. "You speak of sacrifice, but I wonder if your people understand the weight of it, or are you simply using this war as an excuse to test your technology?" Kane's expression darkened. "Careful, Commander. You're questioning the only allies who've managed to turn the tide of this war." Before Kaler could respond, the doors slid open and Scylla entered, looking flustered. "Commander, you need to see this." Kaler and Kane followed her to the bridge. The holographic map displayed a new development, multiple signals converging on their location. At first, Kaler thought it was another Drelvok fleet, but the signals were different. "It's not the Drelvok," Scylla said. "It's Alliance ships." Kaler's brow furrowed. "Reinforcements." No, Kane interjected, her voice grim. Look at their formation. That's not a rescue fleet. It's an investigation team. Kaler's heart sank. The Galactic Council had sent investigators before, but this was different. The Council's emblem flashed on the main screen, accompanied by a terse message. Prepare for inspection. What's this about? Kane asked, her tone sharp. Kaler's expression hardened. The Council doesn't trust easily, especially when it comes to new allies. They're here to assess your actions and decide whether humanity is a threat. Kane folded her arms. Typical politics. While we're out here fighting their war, they're worried about appearances. Kaler didn't disagree, but the Council's concerns weren't unfounded. Humanity's advanced technology and unorthodox tactics had already caused unease among Alliance leaders. If the Council deemed the humans too dangerous, the Alliance could fall apart. Prepare to receive their delegation, Kaler said. And Kane, tread carefully. They're not as forgiving as I am. Kane smirked. I'll keep that in mind. The Council delegation arrived shortly after, their sleek silver ship docking with the Vigilant Star. The lead delegate, a tall, stern-faced Zorathian named Aaron Toval, stepped onto the bridge with a team of advisors. His piercing yellow eyes scanned the room, lingering on Kane. Commander Kaler, Toval said, his voice cold. We've received reports of unconventional tactics employed by your new allies. We're here to ensure their methods align with the values of the Galactic Alliance. Kane stepped forward. With all due respect, Delegate Toval, our unconventional tactics just saved your fleet. Without us, you'd be scraping debris off this ship right now. Toval's gaze hardened. And at what cost? We've seen the footage of your pilot. Lieutenant Carter, was it? Forcing him into such a state is unethical, to say the least. Kane bristled. Carter volunteered for that mission. He knew the risks. And if he hadn't survived, Toval countered, would you have simply replaced him with another pilot? How many lives are you willing to sacrifice for your so-called tactics? The tension in the room was palpable. Kaler stepped between them, his voice measured. Enough. We're all on the same side here. The Drelvok are the real enemy, not each other. Toval's expression softened slightly, but his suspicion remained. We'll be conducting a full review of your operations, Commander Kane. Until then, the Council will decide whether your involvement in this war is appropriate. Kane's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The delegation left the bridge, their presence like a storm cloud hanging over the ship. Later, Kaler found Kane in the observation deck, staring out at the debris field. They'll never trust us, Kane said quietly. Trust isn't given, Kane. It's earned, Kaler replied. And right now, the Council is more afraid of you than they are of the Drelvok. Kane turned to him, her eyes blazing. Good. Let them be afraid. Fear is a powerful motivator. Kaler sighed. Just don't let it blind you. We need unity to win this war, not division. Kane didn't respond. Her gaze returned to the stars, her expression unreadable. Cliffhanger. As tensions between humanity and the Galactic Alliance grew, Kaler couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle wasn't with the Drelvok, but with the fragile alliance holding them together. The atmosphere aboard the Vigilant Star was tense. The Council's delegation had cast a shadow over the recent victory, and the rift between humanity and the Galactic Alliance was widening. On the surface, the two sides remained allies, but beneath that thin veneer, mistrust was festering. Commander Kaler paced the bridge, his thoughts troubled. He couldn't deny the results of humanity's unorthodox tactics. The destruction of the Drelvok mothership had turned the tide of the battle, but the Council's arrival had turned the victory into a political battlefield. Commander, Scylla called from the communications station. The Council delegation is requesting another meeting. They want to review the tactical data from the battle. Kaler sighed. Very well. Schedule it for later today. And the humans? Scylla asked. Should I inform Commander Kane? Kaler hesitated. Kane wasn't the type to sit quietly while her decisions were scrutinized. Still, leaving her out of the discussion would only deepen the divide. Yes, she needs to be there. In the briefing room, the tension was palpable. Delegate Aaron Toval sat at the head of the table, flanked by his advisors. Across from him were Kaler and Kane, their postures stiff with irritation. Toval gestured to a holographic display that showed the chaotic battle. "Let's start with the obvious," he said, his tone sharp. "Your overdrive maneuver nearly killed one of your pilots. This recklessness is unacceptable." Kane leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "And what would you have done, Delegate? Let the Drelvok tear through your fleet. Carter's sacrifice saved thousands of lives." "Sacrifice is one thing," Toval replied coldly. "Turning your soldiers into expendable assets is another. The Galactic Alliance has strict ethical guidelines for warfare. Your methods violate those principles." Kane smirked. "Ethics won't save you when the Drelvok are knocking on your door." Kaler raised a hand, his voice firm. "Enough. This isn't helping. Delegate Toval, I understand your concerns, but we can't ignore the fact that humanity's tactics work. If we're going to win this war, we need their expertise." Toval's gaze shifted to Kaler. "Perhaps, but we cannot let desperation lead us down a dangerous path. If humanity's methods destabilize the Alliance, we'll be no better than the Drelvok." As the meeting continued, an urgent alert interrupted them. "Commander," Scylla's voice came through the comms. "We've detected Drelvok activity on the outer rim of the system. It's a small fleet, but they're heading straight for a civilian colony." Kaler's heart sank. The colony was home to over 1 million civilians, mostly unarmed refugees from destroyed worlds. If the Drelvok reached them, it would be a massacre. "We have to act quickly," Kaler said, rising from his seat. Toval frowned. "The fleet needs time to recover. We can't risk another engagement so soon." Kane stood, her expression resolute. "You might not be ready, but we are. My fleet can intercept them before they reach the colony." "That's suicide," Toval said sharply. "You're already stretched thin. If you fail—" "We won't fail," Kane interrupted. Her tone was cold, unyielding. "But if you're too afraid to act, stay out of our way." Kaler felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He couldn't afford to let the Drelvok attack the colony, but he also couldn't ignore the growing divide between the Alliance and humanity. Finally, he spoke. "Kane, take your fleet and intercept the Drelvok. We'll do what we can to support you from here." Kane nodded. "Understood." The human fleet departed within the hour, their engines blazing as they raced toward the colony. On the bridge of the Vigilant Star, Kaler monitored their progress with a growing sense of unease. "What if they don't make it?" Scylla asked quietly. "They'll make it," Kaler said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. The Drelvok fleet reached the colony's outer defenses, their ships overwhelming the meager orbital platforms in minutes. The civilians on the surface scrambled to evacuate, but there wasn't enough time. And then the humans arrived. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm, their ships moving with precision and ferocity. Kane's voice rang out across the comms. "All units, engage. Protect the colony at all costs." The battle was brutal. The Drelvok fought with their usual relentlessness, but the humans had learned from their previous engagements. Their smaller, faster ships harried the Drelvok formations, drawing their fire away from the colony. But it wasn't enough. A massive Drelvok cruiser broke through the human lines, its weapons charging for a devastating strike on the colony below. Kane's ship, the Erebus, moved to intercept, but even its powerful shields couldn't withstand the cruiser's firepower. "We're taking heavy damage," Kane shouted over the comms. "We need backup." On the Vigilant Star, Kaler made a decision. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We're going to help them." Toval's voice was sharp. "You'll jeopardize the entire fleet." Kaler turned to him, his eyes blazing. "If we let that colony fall, we've already lost. Humanity is fighting for us." It's time we did the same for them. The Alliance fleet arrived just as the Erebus's shields failed. Together, the combined forces of humanity and the Galactic Alliance overwhelmed the Drelvok, driving them back into retreat. On the surface of the colony, the civilians watched in awe as their would-be saviors worked together to protect them. For the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. The battle for the colony had been a turning point, but the war was far from over. The Drelvok, humiliated and enraged by their defeat, had regrouped with an overwhelming force. Their massive armada was now en route to the heart of the Galactic Alliance, intent on wiping out its leadership and plunging the galaxy into chaos. On board the Vigilant Star, Commander Kaler stood before a holomap of the enemy fleet. The Drelvok's numbers were staggering. Thousands of warships, flanked by monstrous carriers and dreadnoughts. Against such odds, even the combined might of the Galactic Alliance and humanity seemed insufficient. "This is their endgame," Kaler said, addressing the Council of Commanders. "If they reach Alliance headquarters, it's over. We must stop them here." Tension hung thick in the room. Delegate Aaron Toval, who had remained skeptical of humanity, looked grim. "Our fleets are stretched thin, Commander. We don't have the resources for a direct engagement." Kane, standing at the back of the room, spoke up. "Then we don't fight them head-on. We use their own arrogance against them." Kaler turned to her, intrigued. "What do you suggest?" Kane stepped forward, her confidence unwavering. "The Drelvok think they're untouchable. They'll keep their most critical assets, command ships, dreadnoughts, at the center of their formation. If we can penetrate their defenses and strike at their leadership, we can scatter the fleet." "And how you propose we do that?" Toval asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Kane smiled. "With the Erebus and the ancient Alliance ships we recovered from the archives. They're smaller, faster, and equipped with stealth tech the Drelvok have never encountered. A surgical strike team could infiltrate their lines while the main fleet engages them on the edges." Kaler considered her plan. It was risky, borderline suicidal, but it might be their only chance. "Do it," he said finally, "but you'll need support. Scylla, prepare the Vigilant Star to join the main fleet. We'll buy you as much time as we can." The final battle begins. The Allied fleet moved into position, meeting the Drelvok armada at a star system littered with asteroid fields and debris from ancient wars. The battlefield was chaotic, with ships weaving through the floating wreckage as laser fire lit up the darkness. The Vigilant Star led the charge, its cannons blazing as it targeted the Drelvok flanks. The enemy responded with brutal efficiency, their warships forming an impenetrable wall around their command vessels. Meanwhile, Kane's strike team, composed of human and Alliance pilots, slipped through the chaos. The Erebus and a handful of ancient stealth ships moved like ghosts, evading detection as they approached the heart of the Drelvok fleet. Inside the Erebus, Kane watched the Drelvok command ship grow larger on the view screen. The monstrous vessel bristled with weaponry, its hull protected by layers of energy shields. "This is it," Kane said to her crew. "We take out their command ship, and the rest will fall apart." "Target acquired," the weapons officer reported, firing EMP torpedoes. The torpedoes streaked toward the command ship, detonating in a brilliant flash. The enemy's shields flickered, leaving a brief opening. "Hit them now," Kane ordered. The stealth ships unleashed their payloads, bombarding the command ship with precision strikes. Explosions rippled across its surface, but the vessel held firm, its massive weapons systems powering up for a counterattack. On the Vigilant Star, Kaler watched the battle unfold. The main fleet was struggling to hold the line, and casualties were mounting. Every second they bought for Kane's team came at a devastating cost. "Commander," Scylla said urgently, "the Drelvok are focusing their fire on us. They're trying to break through." Kaler gritted his teeth. "Divert all power to the shields. Hold them off as long as you can." Back on the Erebus, the situation was growing dire. The Drelvok command ship had activated its point defenses, forcing the stealth ships to retreat. "We're running out of time," Kay muttered. She turned to her navigator. "Set a collision course." The crew stared at her in shock. "Commander, you can't." "I can and I will," Kane said firmly. "If we don't stop them here, the Alliance is finished. Prepare for evacuation." Reluctantly, the crew began transferring to escape pods. Kane stayed behind, her hands steady on the controls. As the Erebus hurtled toward the command ship, she sent one final message. "This is for humanity, and for every life the Drelvok have destroyed. Good luck, Kaler." The Erebus slammed into the command ship at full speed, its reactor core detonating in a massive explosion. The Drelvok flagship shattered, its debris scattering through space. The enemy fleet, suddenly leaderless, faltered. On the Vigilant Star, cheers erupted as the Drelvok ships began retreating. Kaler felt a surge of relief, tempered by grief for Kane's sacrifice. "She did it," Scylla said softly. "She saved us." Aftermath. The Drelvok armada was broken, their forces scattered across the galaxy. The war wasn't over, but the Alliance had gained a critical advantage. For the first time in years, hope seemed within reach. Kaler stood in the observation deck, staring out at the wreckage of the battle. The cost had been high, but humanity's courage and ingenuity had turned the tide. As he gazed at the stars, he vowed to honor Kane's sacrifice by ensuring the Alliance remained united. Together, they would finish what she had started.